Oh, hello. You caught me admiring my Eberly stock bag. I have a few of them, and the reason I admire it so much and I love using their gear is because it's amazing. One of the other reasons I love Eberly stock is they support military and law enforcement openly. And what I mean by that is there are other companies out there where they will make gear specifically for us, but we're more like a dirty little secret. Where Glenn Eberly, the founder and owner of Eberly stock, is a veteran, a former Olympian, and a proud supporter of not only law enforcement but also military folks. And on top of that, they make the best gear and apparel, the bags and apparel that I've ever used. So head on over to Eberly Stock, put in the Ones Ready code for your 10% discount, and make sure that you're supporting the folks that openly and honestly support us. Appreciate it. Hey everybody, welcome to the Ones Ready podcast. You're in the team room with Peaches and myself and a very special guest today, my good friend, the Special Reconnaissance Career Field Manager, or CFM. If I say CFM, that's who I'm referring to. And we can't say his middle name, unfortunately, because this podcast does reach some children. But his name is Chief Sergeant Cox. Steve, welcome to the podcast, man. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me, and thanks for waking up in the morning. That's not everybody's preferred state on Sunday morning. So, also, I'm not a chief yet. They can still pull that back, and I'm waiting on them to fix the glitch. So, we got a couple months.
Just hang on to your stapler. You'll be all right. So as we get going, I think, what we usually do, your first time on the podcast, just, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, your career, your legendary career up to this point, Who is
Legendary.
Steve Cox? Yeah.
Man, okay. How much time we got?
Time we need.
Okay. You can edit out all the dumb stuff, but I'm from Cleveland originally, Cleveland, Ohio, which is important to people from Cleveland, at least. I didn't necessarily grow up there. My mom was in the Air Force. She was a nurse in the Air Force, and that's how I kind of came to see the military as a potential path. So I went to college. I messed that up, and decided to enlist. And really, I just was coming in to get some money and go back to school. That was 1998-ish. I actually came into the Air Force in 1999, and then came into weather, not because I had a great love of weather necessarily, although I always kind of liked science and stuff like that. But the real reason was they offered a significant bonus for weather at that time. So, and I could do it. I met the cut for that. So that's what I did. And then 9/11 happened. And I think this is a lot of people's story. Kind of changed the way I saw, myself and my duty to the nation, so to speak. And back then, there was a career field that was a branch, really a shred out of the Weather AFSC, and it was called SALT, and it was a way to get into special operations and do stuff that was, what I thought was a little closer to something deeper for the military and for America. So I got recruited by a couple of guys that at that point were in Europe, as I was in Germany. And back then we didn't have a super formalized assessment and selection process. It was more like just kind of kicking dudes around or kicking people around and see if they could withstand it. And I guess I did. And then all the training kind of follows from there. So that's how I came in, and I'm glad it went down that way. Like I said, I think that's a pretty common story for people, especially of our generation. 9/11 was a pretty strong punch in the eye, and changed the way a lot of people saw their service. So I'm glad I'm here. It's 22 years later, and here I am. Anyway, that's kind of my background. Several deployments to Afghanistan, several to Iraq. Some that are called deployments that I wouldn't count as deployments. One of those is Stuttgart for South Africa. Awesome time, but not necessarily the same environment as some of those other places. And a couple other cool gigs like that. I spent some time in PACOM at SOCPAC and at the 320th. So a fairly broad base of experience. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily the most heroic guy out there. We definitely have some heroes in the community. I'm not one of them. I just have a broad base, and it works for being a CFM. It doesn't necessarily work in terms of telling heroic stories, but I'm happy with what I ended up with here. So
What
that's
was it about the job that pulled you in? Like, for a lot of us, it was jumping out of planes, shooting, driving motorcycles, that kind of stuff. What was it for you?
Yeah, I think similar. I mean, the weather piece, you get to you get wrapped up in it, and it's pretty technical. It's a long training pipe, so you do come to appreciate that maybe more than anybody else, which is a danger when you start going down like technical kind of stovepipes. But definitely at the point where I was looking to do something a little more exciting and more involved for what we were in at that time, the global war on terror. The shoot, move, communicate stuff is pretty attractive, especially to people that age, I think. And I mean, it's awesome. It's necessary. It's foundational. It's in the end, it's a way to get to work and of course, defend yourself and be offensive. But, the technical side of things certainly kept me going. It was always kind of a little nerdy and maybe I like that. But again, I don't know if there's one easy answer. That's a great question. It's kind of all that stuff.
SR guys are nerds.
Yeah.
That's the running joke. Is Trent is just an extreme nerd, but he hides it. He hides it well because of his hair and his sarcastic demeanor. But man, you're number 2 now, Steve. So that's.
Hey man, I can't deny it. I'll tell you something. Like we talk a lot about kind of technical capability and what that means, and all my time, mostly with the Army, the Rangers, and Special Forces downrange. A little bit of time with MARSOC, but mostly with the Army. And those guys don't need more shooters. They need technical capability. That's generally the case when you're an enabler. And this, maybe I'm putting the cart ahead of the horse a little bit, but when you're filling kind of an enabler role, a soft enabler, they don't necessarily need you to be another door kicker. They need you to be able to do your job. Of course, you have to be able to kick doors and shoot because guess what? They're going to take you out on the range and they're going to test you every single time. You have to be stronger in the gym. You have to be better on the range. All those things. That's just part of being kind of an outsider on a team that has existed as a team for years. And you step in from nowhere and you got to run higher, run faster, jump higher, all that stuff. But really, what brings you to what causes you to be of value to those teams is your technical capability that they can't produce, at least not. So.
I had a lot of success just telling the Taliban I'm a weather guy, not to shoot at me, and it worked out really, really well.
No,
hey guys,
no.
Nerd here. No. So, I mean, I want to kind of jump into it though and move forward. I'm sorry for that comment. You have this whole tactical level career, and you moved up through the ranks, and you spent some time in AATC back in the day when we were still SAUT. But I think the story of how you became the CFM and that process from SAUT to SR and all the misconceptions and misinformation out there. We're saying misinformation these days, right? About what that meant, SAUT to SR. Can you just kind of jump into that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So let's see where to begin. So I kind of split time in my career between doing, what you would consider kind of special operations aviation support and special operations ground support. It's a little bit complicated. I guess I probably don't need to go into much detail there. But what it afforded me was a broad base of experience. So I understood things from kind of both perspectives, and I had time in all kinds of different theaters. I had some time in ATC, as you mentioned, SIEGs, doing really, really intense staff work, man, intense, and learning how to
type. Right.
And so all a broad base. Around 2017, correct me on the dates. You can back me up on this or correct me, but I think it was 2017-ish. The Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force commissioned a force improvement program upon request of the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. At that time, it was General Goldfein. And a force improvement program, or FIP, this was specific to what was known then as Battlefield Airmen. So the Battlefield Airmen program was a program in the Air Force that included all the AFSCs that you can kind of group together as ground forces for the Air Force, including TAC-P, Combat Control, Pararescue, then SAL-T. There were a few others in there, all the related officer AFSCs, but it really was intended to go in and kind of be a grassroots look, that was a favorite thing of General Goldfein's. If you guys remember, he was all about kind of ground truth and reinvigorating squadrons and things like that. So he was really focused on that, the kind of the grassroots truth of what's happening with the Battlefield Airmen program. You guys can attest, like Battlefield Airmen, I mean, the whole program really was in many ways kind of held together with, it's a sort of a common euphemism of what, chicken wire and duct tape, like, and the personalities that exist in Battlefield Airmen or now Special Warfare are prone to keeping things together with chicken wire and duct tape. I mean, we're trained that way. Like, hey, this is what you got, go make it happen. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
So that lends itself sometimes to a situation, over time, where things can start to be coming apart at the seams, and it's hidden by the fact that you have a bunch of professionals that are holding it together with, less than adequate resources. So I think that was General Goldfein's kind of suspicion and why he ran the program. And some of those things he found to be true. And in one of those cases, it was the SAL-T AFSC, which was really sort of languishing for manpower. Things were changing in the environment as well, in the global environment. I mean, the military environment globally, that sort of changed the requirement for that kind of work. And so that information came to light, came forward to the headquarters Air Force staff as a Battlefield Airmen Force Improvement Program product. It was a book. It was like 100 and some pages of, SAL-T was just a small piece of that. Of course, Combat Control had a lot of stuff in there that was relevant. That Special Tactics Weapon System at large, Pararescue, TAC-P, all those AFSCs had all those capabilities, had things that required some form of need. In our case, the SAL-T, it was basically pointed out that it would be better served if the AFSC was moved from where it existed in the Weather Directorate and grouped together with the rest of the Special Warfare AFSCs. And again, back then it was Battlefield Airmen. It changed to Special Warfare, that became official in like 2019. It's not really all that important, although nobody ever liked the Battlefield Airmen name. So this kind of all happened at once. They stood up the Special Warfare Directorate. They nixed the Battlefield Airmen terminology. It all became Special Warfare. Stood up a directorate, an 07 led at that time directorate inside the Pentagon, to look at all these capabilities holistically, which is something that we never had. Moved SAL-T into that directorate, renamed it to Special Reconnaissance, and changed the focus. So again, all this sort of happened within the space of like 2 years, really fast. And so based on that grassroots feedback, in combination with the direction from the Air Force A3 at that time, we were mandated to change the AFSC, change the name, and change the focus. And what I mean by change the focus is the specialty has always been imbued with this sort of foundational level of reconnaissance and surveillance. That's really what has always been all about. The difference is a couple of things. We never had it codified very well. We never had it standardized very well. And the second thing is that we always focused on sort of the environmental factors that had to do with getting air into places, right? The environmental factors being the weather, the ocean, the land, the terrain, all those things that you need to know in order to fly airplanes into, location X, Y, or Z. That focus changed. We didn't completely erase that, but we diminished it by, I would, rough estimate 75%, 80%. And what we filled that white space with was the things that matter today in terms of the environment, in terms of getting access for airplanes. And what that boils down to is the electromagnetic spectrum kind of environment. So, and more specifically, looking at ways to mitigate systems, adversarial systems that deny us access. So that's where we changed the focus. That was our mandate. And to put it in layman's terms, we cut away a lot of the meteorology and we added in cyber and electromagnetic spectrum stuff. And then the other really key piece that I always hammer down on 5 times over is we are heavily invested in codifying foundational reconnaissance surveillance. Like that's what we do. The rest of it is the technical capability that makes us unique. But in order to be successful in a joint environment when it comes to recce and surveillance, man, it's a lot about credibility. And it's a lot about checking the same blocks that your sister service units are checking. And so that's where we've invested a large part of our energy. But I'll stop talking because I think I'm rambling.
No, you're not rambling. I'm just sitting here thinking like, okay, how do I ask this and actually be able to get an answer out of it? The reason why is because one of the questions that we always get is in terms of EW and cyber, what is SR doing? And I know that a lot of that is still being developed, so I definitely don't want to put the cart before the horse. And we very, very quickly go into secret and top secret stuff. So definitely don't want to even come close to that. But in terms of EW and cyber, well, let's just stick with EW for right now. Like, what can we expect, or what can people that are coming in to do SR, what can they expect in regards to EW, to do?
Sure. So there are plenty of systems out there that are unclass. You kind of hit Peaches a little bit. We're still building the plan, so it is a little bit of talking around stuff, but as a matter of fact, we're going to come together at the end of this month and really hammer down on the details of that. But you can expect some foundational training in sort of academics and probably some hands-on stuff. We haven't clarified that 100%, but that will happen inside your first year and a half of existing in the Air Force as a special reconnaissance airman. You're going to get things like electromagnetic theory and antenna theory and stuff like that, and how kind of electrons move through the environment and what they do in terms of picking up airplanes or identifying objects, or how do we jam those things, all that kind of stuff. How do we directionally find systems that are looking for airplanes, those kinds of things, adversarial systems. So you're going to get that, at least a foundational base inside the initial portions of your training, and then we'll build on that. And we're still trying to figure out like how cyber kind of connects into that and where that's going to exist in the pipeline. I think most of the cyber stuff we're looking at, after you kind of graduate into your operational command. I think that's where we're going to start layering on the cyber stuff, but we're still kind of figuring that out. And again, it'll be focused on gaining access for air. So yeah, at risk of getting too technical here, but that's the focus. And to be honest with you, like when I go talk to a lot of the people that are in the know on this stuff, we all throw around the word cyber and we throw around the word EMSO. And I mean, like the reason that these things are confusing to people is because the people that are in charge of kind of putting these policies together are still putting them together. Like it's still coming together. It's not solidified. And I think as I learn, as I go along and kind of see how people are thinking about EMSO and cyber, something that occurs to me is there's not one solution for EMSO or cyber. Like, I mean, cyber is huge, right? EMSO is huge. Everything you do with a signal, you could consider to be EMSO, including cyber. Of course, some people feel differently about that, and you can see where these policy decisions are affecting what we're trying to do on the ground, how we're trying to come to a solution on the ground. But anyway, my point is, we throw around these words. I think that cyber's not going anywhere. Cyber is going to be a part of the DoD's life, right? Like it's going to be sort of layered into everything that we do in the DoD. How we manipulate cyber as an AFSC is one minute layer of the stack of things that will happen in the cyber community, and how cyber will be kind of manipulated here and there. Even inside ST, I would argue maybe a little bit at risk, but even inside ST, I think that we're not the only cyber solution. That we're a layer to the problem. That's kind of how I see it today. That probably doesn't answer your question directly.
Well,
certainly a little technical for the folks out there interested on the other side of the line. But
no, I mean, I get it, because it's actually can be, if you don't know any better, it can be difficult to think that, cyber plays a role in our planes that are up there flying right now, whether it's rudimentary or whether it's very detailed and heavily rooted in. But it's just, you hear cyber, and I know me, I automatically go back to South Park, the character in South Park's in there, that is not what we're talking about when we talk about, SR doing cyber. This is, it is definitely not the person sitting in their mom's basement eating Cheetos and pounding Monster and stuff like that. But there are very tactical and technical aspects of cyber that SR, and you're right, the special tactics community at large, are able to inflict or influence on an objective or an enemy, which is very, very, very beneficial, especially as we begin to move forward in 2022 and on. So
yeah. I mean, any system out there. So I think this is safe to say. Any system in the world is using some form of data, right? Some signal to move things back and forth to exist. I mean, there's no system out there that doesn't have a air quotes cyber element to it, right? So now you apply that to what we do in special tactics for access, and I think you have your answer. And again, it's really hard to kind of get too detailed, but that's where we're looking. Access. That's where we're looking, and specifically. Inside the Air Force, you have many cyber elements. You have an entire AFSC that's dedicated to offensive cyber. You have an entire AFSC that's dedicated to defensive cyber. You have information networking. You have all these aspects of cyber inside the Air Force. I mean, there's a cyber comm. You know what I mean? So cyber is massive, and even inside the Air Force it is. But there are places on the planet where all those assets can't get to. And as has always been our strength in special tactics and in SOF, we have placement and access to places on the planet that most people can't get to. And that's where special reconnaissance comes in terms of cyber and EW for that matter.
Yeah, I think it can be confusing for people out there that they've seen the movies where a guy with a laptop can access, any system remotely, do all these things and clear the way for the guys on the ground, the door kickers, to go do what they need to do. But I think the reality is thinking of these things more like kinetic things that you're familiar with, and then just adding the extra layer of the non-kinetic offensive or defensive action required for us to really get after the entire ST mission set and how SR plays a role in, access, recovery, and strike, and how we all kind of benefit each other using these similar techniques moving forward. If you have anything to say about our role within the Air Force ST community.
Yeah. So I mean, just using the current command strategic guidance, something that's very important for AFSOC moving forward is, a few things. First of all, I mean, it's been a pretty common message that, what we've done over the last 20 years, although highly valued, is not necessarily the future for AFSOC. And that's not necessarily even determined by AFSOC alone. I mean, it's the global environment that determines these things, right? So we got really good at being special tactics over the last 20 years. We practiced really hard at it, and we all deployed a million times. and did it in real time, and now things are changing. So we have to change too. But one of the things that stands out in AFSOC's strategic guidance is the level of attribution and levying costs on adversaries, and I think that's where that's the piece that where we fit in especially well is not the AFSC alone, but maybe especially the AFSC is kind of the scalable attribution aspects and levying costs. That's where I see us fitting in the best. When we built it, when we built the AFSC, I think a common misperception is that we just took a bunch of SAL-T guys and rebuilt the AFSC. And we did that kind of in a bubble, right? Like that's what people think. Like we just had, I don't know, 4 or 5 kind of good friends around a table with some drinks, and we rebuilt the AFSC. That is a gross misconstruence of events. We built it with under the leadership of the 24 SAL, who kind of owns the majority of the operational capability, Special Operations Wing, 24 Special Operations Wing inside of AFSOC. Under their leadership, under their guidance, we brought together a team, and it really consisted of all of the AFSCs inside ST, including Pararescue, TAC-B, Combat Control, SAL-T at the time, now SR. We layered onto that Intel people, including SIGINT people, cyber people. We had pilots in there. We had, back then it was EW officers. We had STOs. We had CROs, Special Tactics officers, Combat Rescue officers, TAC-P officers. We had civilians. We had active duty military folks. We brought in guard people. So we had all this influence when we rebuilt the AFSC, and we really did it using every single piece of commander's guidance that we could get our hands on. AFSOC guidance, SOCOM guidance, Air Force guidance at the time. It was General Goldfein put out his 2030 plan. So we really we tailored this thing to the needs moving forward, including national security strategy 2018. That was really the primary document that has driven all of this, right? As it should be. But that was the document that drove, like, hey, what we've been doing for the last 20 years, although awesome, is not going to prepare us to use the military as a national instrument of power moving forward. So that's what drives, as it should, all the subsequent guidance, the national defense strategy, the Air Force strategy, SOCOM strategy, AFSOC strategy, so on and so forth. And we dug into all that when we built the AFSC, when we built it out. And then some staff nerdery for everybody out there. That's not the end. Then you have to coordinate it up and down chains several times over. SIGs, you know all about it. And it seems painful. It seems exhaustive. But it should be. It should be painful. It should be exhaustive. It should cause some consternation and some frustration, because that's just what happens when you change things for the positive. So I don't know if that answers your question directly, Siegs. I went on a rant, but all that to say, the way we have fit into special tactics and AFSOC is really not done in a bubble. We crossed many lanes to get where we are. Hopefully, we incorporated as much feedback as was possible to get there. So.
Yeah, and I hope you understand. Like, I'm trying to ask questions that we get. I think I know how everything works because I'm pretty arrogant. But hey, if combat control is going to seize an airfield to land planes, what does SR do during that time? Doesn't combat control just do everything? Like that type of question, like specifically our role in airfield seizure, access, and then PR, and then strike as well.
Yeah, sure. So I don't know that those types of, so I'm outside of my lane a little bit. I gotta defer because I don't work for AFSOC right now. I work for Headquarters Air Force, and although we are the functional authority, we're not the command authority. Technically, SOCOM is the command authority. They have OPCON over the assets. So how they employ special tactics and special reconnaissance is not necessarily up to the career field manager or the functional manager. But I would say I wouldn't take it for granted that all those things are, as they even look like today, will look like they do tomorrow. I think there's potential that all those kind of mission sets get shaken up and refocused. That's not up to me. but I would defer to AFSOC's strategic guidance that prepares everybody for changes like that. I mean, that's kind of the point. It's not going to look the way it always has. So I don't know what a team might look like in the future. I would say that it's not a given that the same composition of the teams we send out today to do things are going to be the composition that we send out tomorrow. It could be the case that you need a special reconnaissance heavy team to go and do something, to get placement and access, to do something with EW or with cyber, or to just get people to a place where they can do something with something that's more combat control focused or TAC-P focused or pararescue focused or something else. It could just as well be the case that you maintain a combat control heavy team or a pararescue heavy team to do PR, to do airfield seizures, things like that. But I guess the point is, I don't know if the question's answered yet at the unit level, at the operational level. They're still experimenting with those things. I would say, that's where we're at, experimentation. And that's what the guidance is pushing out to. I mean, if you go look at SOCOM, General Clark's training guidance, just from, I think, last year or the year before, he's very heavy on conventional force, special operations forces, integration, interoperability, and independence. He calls it CF-SOF-I3, and that's not a new thing. That's not a General Clarkism. That goes back, I think, a few commanders for SOCOM. But really since probably Admiral McRaven, SOCOM has started to focus more on, hey, SOF, although very kinetic for the last 20 years, that's not the intent for SOF. The intent is really to be more of a supporting force for the supported force, which is conventional forces. Conventional forces do most of the work, right? SOF typically supports. And when you take SOF out of that box and you apply them in a larger scale, as we did for the last 20 years, then you certainly have effects, but you have pretty heavy effects on the force because we're inherently small, right? So if you're inherently small, it means you got to do more work over a similar time span. So you really work those people hard, and probably some of them beyond the point where they should be worked. So I would say experimentation, getting closer to the force, that comes from both SOCOM and AFSOC. By force, I mean conventional force. So for us in the Air Force, for us in Special Reconnaissance, I think that means looking at how we employ air power for the benefit of SOCOM. And I don't know that that's been our specific mission for the last 20 years. I think for the last 20 years, we've been really focused on just counterterrorism and really getting after bad folks out there. I think moving forward into 2035 and beyond, I think the focus is more not that mission's going away, and I'm fairly certain that the strategic guidance doesn't say that. As a matter of fact, it says that mission is not going away, but it probably will be scaled back, and our focus will be more about getting airplanes to the places where airplanes need to get to, or air power, that is, to the places where air power needs to get to. So I think that's what we're doing right now. I think we're all in experimentation mode and figuring out what a team looks like. And I believe that's where the commanders want us to be.
But I get questions from kids wondering if they're going to see combat if they join. I know, I'm sorry, but this is one of my favorite questions that we get, hey, if I join Air Force Special Warfare, will I see combat? And that's always a tough question to answer. And I get accused of being super vague about SR specifically from the podcast. But you know what I mean? Even when we were SAUT, if someone was like, hey, am I going to see combat? It's like, maybe if you're joining as a combat controller, are you guaranteed to see combat and all these other things? But some of the expectations out there that are kind of overflowing from GWAT, what would you tell those kids that are asking those types of questions and trying to get into the coolest stuff possible before they join?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I would say this. If you want to come and do reconnaissance, Special Reconnaissance is a great place to do that. And reconnaissance is hard, man. It's hard. It's not always glorious. As a matter of fact, it's often inglorious in the fact that you do things that never make headlines. So if you want to be in combat, I mean, that's awesome, and that's a really great place to start from. But I don't even know if special operations is the focus in terms of that. If you really want to be in combat, maybe you should be looking at an infantry division or something like that. I think special operations is moving to a place that's you're going to be doing things that do not always win you recognition. Um, that's maybe the best way I can say it. And along those lines, we talked a lot about this in terms of recruiting and what it means how do we like optimize recruiting for those sort of attributes that we're after. And this is only Steve Cox opinion now. We're in Steve Cox land, so you can take it with many grains of salt and then throw it in the garbage if you'd like. But this is my opinion. I think, as we look at kind of the AFSCs today, you have attributes that stand out, right? Like pararescue guys, and this is very general. Wave tops, of course, there are exceptions, and I'm speaking in generalities at great risk. But pararescue men, largely, if you go talk to those folks, they want to save lives. That's what they want to do. They want to rescue people. It's in their job description, right? So they work very hard to do that, and they're absolutely 1,000% dedicated to it. Impressively so. Combat controllers want to. Peaches, you please correct me where I'm off, but combat controllers want to be involved in the fight, man. They want to fight. They want to, and that, like, they love comms. They love integrating. They're fighters. They're warriors. TAC P is very similar, I think. Love to integrate. TAC P is like an integrative personality. Like, that's their thing. They're integrators. Special reconnaissance surveillance people. I think it takes a psychology that you don't mind it being hard, and you don't mind never getting credit for the things that you do. You don't mind doing hard things that will probably never be recognized. And now we're sprinkling on that this technical capability, a technical aptitude that maybe isn't required elsewhere. But that's how I kind of see those lines, and they're not lines; it's all blurry. But that's the difference in my mind. That's kind of the personality, the psychology that we're going after for special reconnaissance people. If you want to do combat, I mean, it's possible. It's certainly possible that happens. In a reconnaissance environment, you're generally trying to avoid combat. If you engage in combat in a reconnaissance environment, then you either did something wrong, or you got caught, or you're probably breaking contact or something like that. So I'm not trying to shy people away. It takes all those skills to be. It takes combat skills to be in a reconnaissance environment. Those are a solid part of the foundation. But that's not the focus for reconnaissance surveillance, and it's probably not the focus for SOF.
Yeah, combat is, actual fighting it for anybody, whether it's Rangers, SF, MARSOC, SEALs, us, whatever. It is, if you want to say right place, right time, or maybe wrong place, wrong time, like it really is. I mean, there are SEALs that are out there that just NSF wrong, like they just missed it, like barely, They left country, and the next mission there was a big firefight. Like you just don't know. There are PJs that have gone their entire career without a rescue. That's few and far between, but there's controllers that have done the JTAC mission that have deployed that didn't get a chance to drop and never got in a fight. Maybe they got in a fight, but they never got a chance to drop because aircraft didn't make it there on time. Like, it really is right place, right time. So, that's just the reality of it. And then, so a couple points on the things that you're talking about is, and one thing that we don't talk about, and I don't think Command Chief Smith, the SOCOM senior list, has talked about, but the different phases of military operations, and SOF generally is in the phase 0 and phase 1 of military operations. So, which is generally short of combat. Afghanistan and Iraq was a little different thing because that was such a SOF centric and SOF heavy missions that happened to take 20 years. But that was just not a one-off, but that's unlike what we would normally do. And sorry, I'm just going down to things I wrote while you were talking. You're 100% correct about General Clark and his vision, because he sees it as soft is not just kicking doors and that kind of stuff. Because I was sitting in a meeting with him, and they were talking about recruitment for soft, and one of the posters was your typical, I think it was a Ranger busting in a door, and it was a really cool picture, right? And he's like, okay, that represents a fraction of what soft does. Like as SOCOM as a headquarters, a fraction of it. He goes, and that's not, that picture, though, is motivating and is a part of what we do. It is not everything that we do, and so we needed to branch out. So they changed it, and they integrated a lot of cyber EW depictions as well as other soft capabilities. So that was pretty cool. You're right. We evolve constantly. What we look like now is definitely not what we looked like 2 years ago. And 2 years from now, we will not look like what we do. And that's not just us. That's SEALs, SF, Rangers. That's everybody, right? That's just the reality of it.
Absolutely.
And then I think it's unfair for you to say that this SR did not start on a bar napkin because it definitely the idea started on a bar napkin, because that's how most ideas start. You get a couple people in the bar and they're like, it would be cool. And then the real work comes, all the staffing and all the real late nights and grinding and pissing people off. But so there's some good things that start from bar napkins.
No, that's fair. Fair. We did. I mean, there were some things that like we struggled through, like, the name, for example. And I like I said, the Salty legacy is surveillance or reconnaissance surveillance. That was always the foundation. The difference is like, what are you reconnoitering? What are you surveilling, right? Like, so that's kind of what changed. And the other piece that changed is really making sure that we are a jointly credible asset in terms of reconnaissance surveillance. And to do that, you really got to set up the foundation correctly. I don't think reconnaissance and surveillance is something that you dip your toes in. Like it's a commitment. You can't sort of half-ass it. You really got to whole ass it. And so when we were going over the name, that was kind of one of these bar napkin conversations pieces. But what do we do? Do we come in soft or do we come in hard? And we decided to come in hard. And knowing that we were going to catch some attention and some flack, but ultimately that hey, if we're gonna go into this, we should go all in as a community, and it got support, and honestly, like that bar napkin conversation happened before I ever got to the seat, so I can't even claim credit. I can't say I wasn't in the bar when we were writing on the napkin, but I can't claim all that credit. I just picked up the reins. But you're right.
No, but
right.
what I do need though is that you have PJs or Js. Like I need a good name instead of SR dudes, because I can't, like I got controllers, I got Js. Like I need a real SR dude. Like that's what I use, but we need another bar napkin to help with the naming convention.
Well, we talked about like Special Reconnaissance Airmen, but then you're at SRA, which is kind of already used by the Air Force a little bit. So,
yeah.
There's a couple of things that floated around, but
the one thing that ties into Recce that we haven't touched on right now is the kind of not RPA, I'm sorry, remote pilot, but the small unmanned aerial systems, the little drones, and the array of different drones that we're kind of using. Can you elaborate on some of that a little bit?
Sure. So as with all things, these are probably very disappointing answers. I'm just going to say that for people who are looking for to dispel vagaries. Like I'm not dispelling any vagaries. I'm just creating more. But so the Air Force is going through a huge kind of revamp where we in A3S are leading that charge as mandated by, our bosses, the A3, but this came out of a kind of an audit agency report that the Air Force is not programmatically established very well to manage a SWAS program. So So we're looking at what that looks like in the future. What should a programmatically supportive program look like from the Air Force's perspective? That's our charge. But all that to say that we're working that out. So AFSOC is kind of the OPR, the primary responsibility right now for the Air Force's SWAS program. Although that's changing, and I think A3S is picking up those reins, and it may move somewhere else upon conclusion of our analysis. But the whole SWAS program, I mean, jointly is shifting. I mean, you guys know probably better than I. I'm not as techie as most people out there because I've gotten really good at typing over the last 3 years and less good at technical stuff. But man, there's so much going on with SWAS. The groups. There's talk of changing how the groups are structured. For everybody out there, we have groups of small UASs, unmanned aerial systems or aircraft systems. It's basically the groups are, for simplest terms, they're based on weight. There are some other factors that determine where a system falls within a group, but in the simplest terms, they're based on weight, and the group 1 being the lowest weight. So your tiny little, not much bigger than a Dragonfly systems, those would be like group 1 up to a certain weight. I don't ask me to rip out the numbers right now, but there are 5 of those, and group 5 being your big systems, and group 1 being the ones, group 2 maybe that we would be invested in today from an operator point of view. Obviously we're more concerned with the smaller systems, but we have it in our training plan today that we're training on both rotary and fixed wing systems. Although that distinction is becoming muddy. Like, it just everything is changing so rapidly. I argue, from my perspective, that all this talk about SWAS, cyber, EMSO, AI, machine learning, all that stuff is changing. And so it's going to be really hard in the future to kind of distinguish between, like, you're not going to be able to point a finger at somebody and say, hey, so you do cyber, right? Like, because that might mean that you also, like, in what capacity? That could just as easily mean typing on a keyboard as it could flying a SWAS, 5 years from now. So I think all those things are sort of converging. We're putting things on these platforms that do stuff that's non-kinetic, like cyber and EW, and we're looking at things that work that way. We're looking at how AI changes the game in terms of SWAS and how systems communicate with the human and how systems communicate with each other. What's the human interface in the future for a swarm of drones or something like that? All that stuff is in the works. It's changing. We're not the only ones changing it, by the way. I mean, that stuff's changing globally. Today, we train on rotary wing and fixed wing systems. We train on those systems in order to sense and collect from the environment. And we're also training on ways to use them in a more kinetic fashion. So we're doing all that. All that stuff is what we do today. What it's going to look like 5 years from now, man, I wouldn't even venture to guess. But I would venture to guess. I would guess that all those things that I just mentioned, this whole EMSO environment, including cyber, SWAS, AI, it's all going to kind of merge, and we're going to see systems that are feeding some sort of brain with all that data. And it'll be interesting to see how the human fits in that loop going forward, but we're not there yet. So there's a vague answer to your pointed question.
Well, but that kind of begs the question: when we have access to all of these technological tools and all this other stuff, why are we building the career field on top of this very low tech capability? Why is the foundation the classical reconnaissance? Is there truly a low tech solution to these high tech problems? Because it seems like for some people out there, if you don't have the high tech solution, then like why are we putting our guys through this pipeline and gals and beating them up and teaching them this hardcore reconnaissance stuff when we have all this technology to do the job for us?
That's a great question, man. Great question. So, how to start there. You, so there are a few things out there known as the soft truths, the pesky soft truths. I think that's a good place to start. There's a couple that apply to your argument or your question, Siegs. Humans are more important than hardware. This is one that comes to mind. If you go and operate in an environment, so we talk about this all the time, the fundamentals, right? And we could talk specifically about reconnaissance surveillance, which I can and will. But just to use a kind of a more well understood example, you guys both know this very well. But we all got really used to using GPSs, right, to navigate from location A to B. I mean, we do as humans in the world today. I don't even, if you ask me how to drive like to some place around DC, I might have a problem because I'm just used to following the blue line on the map, right? Like, it didn't used to be that way. Like, I remember growing up, I knew every road in my hometown. I knew how to get everywhere. You know what I mean? And now I've been living here for 3 years, and there are places that I can't navigate to, on my own. I have to use the blue line. But what if that blue line gets taken away, right? Like, so what if you're out in the field and all of a sudden something happens, some adversary turns something on from the sky, beams down some electrons onto your position, and all of a sudden your GPS doesn't work anymore? Like, what do you do then? Like, do you just lay down and die, or do you maybe try to fish out that small, heavy thing that glows in the dark a little bit, and then another thing that's made out of paper and with lines on it, and try to figure out how to marry up those two things together? I'm talking about a map and compass for some of the young folks out there, but so like that's the simplest example, like, because you're never going to you can't predict what the adversary is going to do, right? At least I think that's a safe approach. If you approach a situation believing that you have the adversary kind of nailed down, you can predict everything that's going to happen, you're already at a disadvantage, right? So I think building in those fundamentals, those fundamentals that will save you when you don't have the techie systems that you trained to use, that's critical to your survival and the success of the mission. So yeah, soft truths. Humans are more important than hardware. Soft cannot be mass produced. I think that's another big one. Like, it's too late to train on fundamentals when you're trying to go into war, right? Like, or go into some environment. It's too late. You better have them down. And that's why we hammer them so hard up front, and that's why we make it hard physically. I don't know. Does that get close?
Yeah, well, and in my brain, the great power competition that we talk about, or the near peer environment, by definition means that if we have SWATs capable of these things, they probably have the antidote to that technology, right? And I think when we talk about near peer, we're mostly speaking about the technological advantages that we used to have, I think. But especially when we're talking about SWAS and a few of the other things in EW, even when we went into Syria, I remember getting briefings on that, and it was basically like, what are we going into? And it's like, worst environment imaginable, type thing. And it's not like they were,
that's all you have to say. Scariest environment.
Scariest environment. But like, and to me, that's where it comes back. Like, if you can't work, HF radios, if you can't move through an environment and understand the technology that the adversary is bringing to bear, I think relying on those things is dangerous. And if the last 20 years has taught us anything, I think it's that even with our technology advantage over the folks that we're fighting in Afghanistan, that there's ways around it. There's still ways to affect the enemy using the low tech solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it was me, I would be looking, if I was going into a fist fight, right? Like, I'd be looking to take away, if I knew the person I was going in the fist fight with had relied on something in particular, like it was fundamental to their ability to fight. That's the first thing I would try to take away, right? Like, so if we go into a fight and it's the perception of the enemy that we're completely reliant on our tech or our comms or some node out there, right? That's the first thing they're going to hunt down. So I think those are the other concept that comes to mind when you're pulling the string, Siegs, is the idea behind decentralized execution. And so if you've got all your, it's classic, right? So this is like principles of war, man. You put all your stuff in one place. So that's a huge mistake, because That's a great place for an enemy to go and blow your stuff up. So the more you can kind of, if you put that in terms of like techie capability and fundamental like hard stuff to do, navigating through terrain without a GPS, if you invest all your capability, all your training in a techie piece of equipment, then you've just given the enemy a great target, right? Like so that's why I think you have to be able to survive as a human first without all that stuff before you layer it on, and that's why we hit fundamentals so hard. And frankly, like that's what the reconnaissance community respects, and I believe that's the reason why, because they see when you go out into a denied environment, a near peer or a denied environment, and it's a really complex movement from A to B, and you have to do it in the dark, and you have to do it, in really complex terrain, and it's cold, and you don't have much food, and you're running out of water. Like these are the problem sets that a reconnaissance element runs into, and it's real. You know what I mean? You can't you can't prepare for that stuff when you're out there doing it. You have to be prepared for it before you go.
Yeah.
Fundamentals.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I know the position you sit in right now, like, you're up at DC, you're not kind of at the squadron, but your position actually provides a lot of you're kind of, me at the squadron level, I'm down and in, I'm focused on the people, I'm focused on operations directly, whereas, you're able to focus on kind of up and out and look towards the future and plan towards the future of SR and SP as a whole. And I would not want to put you in a position where you're answering the question for the community, but in Steve Cox's opinion, like, where do you see the future of special tactics in general going? And maybe with an SR flavor, if you want.
Yeah, sure. I can try that. So I'll say this. I think special tactics is going to get closer to the Air Force. I'll say that. I think, like, historically, Peaches, you and Siegs, both you guys, like, how many big Air Force exercises does special tactics play in historically? Not very
Red
many,
flag,
right?
green flag. Yeah, not many.
Not that many. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think that's safe to say. I think special tactics can and should participate in those things more, because that becomes the value now to SOCOM, especially in a resource constrained environment, where we can't all do everything. We have to kind of scale back and maximize the resources that we have on hand. And for us, that's the Air Force. Those are the resources we have on hand. That may not be as sexy as kind of the things that have happened, for the last 20 years. And I understand the questions about combat, excuse me. We get those like from special tactics guys, right? Like the young guys are like, It's not only just people coming off the street. I mean, it's the young people in special tactics today ask those same questions. They want to do that stuff because they see Peaches and they see GZ and they see all the freaking heroes, man, that are out there, like that have done it, and they want to replicate that. It's just not the environment that exists today. But who knows where we'll be in 5 years? But now I'm rambling again. I think getting closer to the Air Force, I would say that, like. And I think the Air Force understands that, which is a very good place to be. I think that historically, like, there's been kind of a divide, like, especially maybe for special tactics, like, how well known were we in the Air Force? We were pretty obscure, right? Like, I think so. I mean, I could be wrong, but the way that impacts us or can impact us negatively is that if we're obscure to the Air Force, when it comes time for the Air Force to tighten its belt, like, what's going to get shoved out? The obscure things, right? At least I think so. But nowadays, we're having success kind of promulgating the ideas, special tactics ideas and concepts of operation. We've had a lot of success kind of moving those around the air staff, and we've infiltrated the air staff more so than we ever have with combat controllers, TAC Ps, pararescue guys, special tactics officers, special reconnaissance guys. So that's a big part of it, man, is kind of building the narrative of what special tactics is. I think moving forward, like, where the Air Force has historically sort of just accepted that special operations are going to occur and they're going to shape the environment appropriately, and it's kind of a magic, fairy dust thing. Like, hey, SOF happened and it worked. It was successful. Okay, we can talk about other things now. Let's talk about, the big muscle movements for the Air Force. That's not an accepted fact anymore. And I believe that's a good thing. We shouldn't just accept that, shaping operations are going to be effective, or that SOF is going to be effective, or that AFSOF is going to be effective. Because if we just accept that, then we don't test it. We don't measure it. There's no ability to figure out where the gaps are. You know what I mean? Like, no, actually, we shouldn't just accept that, because, hey, look, when you actually apply these metrics to the problem set, guess what? We got a lot of gaps, and those gaps are fillable by staffing, by programming in the Air Force, and of course in SOCOM as well. So there is some kind of funniness or tension, friction when it comes to kind of SOF responsibilities, SOCOM unique or SOCOM procure stuff and Air Force procure stuff. And that's a relationship which involves some friction. But ultimately, I believe like stepping closer to what the Air Force is doing helps relieve some of that friction, and really ends up giving SOCOM the product that they really are asking for, which is air power.
Yeah, solving Air Force problems.
Exactly.
And that's what we're looking to do. And we're trying to solve everybody's problems. But so on that note, like what would be, yeah, I know if you solve everybody's problems, you're solving nobody's problems. But yeah, so with that, what is some advice that you would give to the kind of 15 to 35-year-old that is either looking to join up as SR, or if they're cross-training, get SR?
Yeah, so that's a great question too, Peaches. This might be a standard kind of boring answer, but I'll start here and maybe I'll ramble into something that's actually meaningful. Like the physicality, don't discount the physicality. Hopefully nothing I've said today gives the wrong impression that we don't need to be as strong. That's absolutely not the case. I think hopefully my points have been that we need to be just as strong in the fundamentals and on the physical side of things, because the techie stuff is what the enemy is going to try to take away from us. So I think being physical, and I mean, this is maybe a little cliche, but man, when you're there physically, there's everybody is going to be dealt some mental blows in training, right? That's the point. The point is the point is not to deal you physical blows. Maybe it is a little bit, but the real point is to deal you mental blows, and to see how you work through those things mentally, emotionally, intellectually. And the best way that we can deal mental blows in a training environment is by stressing you physically. So if you prepare yourself physically for training, then you have diminished the requirement for your brain when you're dealt the physical stress. Your brain is able to function more clearly. You're more emotionally there. That's the real value of being prepared physically. It's not just so you can do more push-ups or more pull-ups. It's so that when you are dealt the mental situation, the mentally stressful situation, your physicality is not a problem. If your physicality is a problem, then man, you're probably not going to get through the mental issue that you're really being dealt with. So I think that's the most important thing. The other important thing is, if you have questions about cross training or getting in, please contact the career field managers, me specifically, especially for special recon. Those interested in special reconnaissance. Trent Siegmiller is a great source, man. He understands that whole process extremely well. I'm a great source. Chief Will Reisner on the AFSOC side, just a shout out to RR. He's a great source. Don't hesitate to contact the functional players just because we're up on some staff that seems ethereal. Like, we're here to answer questions. And I always have to caveat, of course, if you're cross training, go through your supervisor, man. Don't keep people in the dark, because you'll just make them mad and you'll screw up your chances. So, but yeah, I think that's it. I wouldn't even say, like, the way we're leaning in right now, we haven't exactly figured out like what the technical kind of competencies that are required. I mean, I have some ideas, but right now we're not requiring any special aptitudes in terms of cross training, or even coming in for, say, electrical capability or cyber capability. We will train that stuff. We'll train it, and it's trainable. So we're not doing that today. That could change in the future, but we're not doing that today. It's a singular general requirement, and of course the physical requirement being probably the most important thing. But,
yeah, we're on a level 1 train up, and we're about to do night slicks, right? Like that's where we're at before we start slapping all the rest of the stuff on. But
right, yeah. Yep.
But yeah, that bandwidth thing that you talk about, physicality and all that, I couldn't agree more. And basically everything else that you said. And we've come to the end of our time, and I'm trying not to be weird about it, but I really appreciate you coming on. You know, we obviously know each other, but I hope this answers a bunch of the questions for everybody out there. And we might have to have you on again based on the amount of questions that we're going to get. And they're just because of how vague you've been, you know, about everything. So, way to go. But that's it for us. Yeah. So Steve,
thanks for having me, man. And I apologize for the vagueness. We'll tighten it up. We'll get the questions answered specifically. But you know, we live in a gray zone.
That's it. And hey, so I appreciate y'all listening. Go ahead and leave us a review and like and subscribe, and we will catch you all next time. Train hard.